Hello and welcome back to the simulated 2024 F1 World Championship. This is round number 9 of 24, taking place from Montreal in Canada. It's time for my first race on the new F1 game. Yes, I caved and got F1 24, and after playing it, I really wish I hadn't, but hey, we're used to playing awful games on this channel, so what's one more, eh? Here's how the driver's standings shape up after last time out at Monaco. Yuki Tsunoda still occupies the top spot, a full race win's worth of points ahead of Leclerc in P2. The three champs of Hamilton, Alonso and Verstappen still occupy positions 3 to 5, with Norris holding down P6. Ricciardo moves himself up into P7, leapfrogging Albon, Perez and Sainz, who wrap up the top 10. As for the constructors, RB remain in P1, 28 points ahead of Ferrari in P2. Mercedes move just ahead of Red Bull in P3, with Aston Martin remaining in 5th. McLaren are slowly catching in 6th, with Williams being hounded by Alpine for P7. Sauber hold down 9th, and Haas still occupy the rear in P10. Compared to the actual standings, Verstappen's lead slips slightly due to Leclerc finally breaking the Monaco curse, leaping ahead of Perez into P2. Norris and Sainz also overtake the Mexican driver, leaving him down in P5. Piastri solidifies his P6 position after a solid Monaco outing, with the two Mercedes drivers of Russell and Hamilton holding station in 7th and 8th. Alonso remains in P9, with Tsunoda closing in behind him in P10. As for the constructors, Red Bull's lead to Ferrari has been narrowed down to 24 points, with McLaren also keeping themselves in contention in P3. Mercedes put some daylight between themselves and Aston Martin in 4th, and RB solidified their P6 position. Haas remain in 7th, Williams overtake Alpine with their first points of the season in 8th, and Sauber are now the only team yet to get on the board. Now it's time to find out who will be racing as for the Canadian GP. With Ricciardo being removed from the board, both RB drivers are now out of play until the wheel has been exhausted. With 12 drivers left to be selected, let's spin the wheel to see who we will be racing as in Montreal. And for our first 100% race in F1 24, we will be taking the wheel as Oscar Piastri in the McLaren. Can we emulate McLaren's current IRL form and fight for the win? It's time for the Canadian Grand Prix.
It is time to go qualifying in Canada. A historic track. Looks simple, it's anything but. Welcome to Montreal.
Alrighty then, here we are in the cockpit for Oscar Piastri, and as you saw in the intro, it was raining quite heavily, but the game suggested I should go onto the softs for my qualifying lap, which you've probably seen this glitch many times for other F1 content creators, but dear God, how did Codemasters let that glitch through in the first place is anyone's guess. As we skip to the end of our first flying lap, you can see everyone else actually did a time on soft tyres, which was pretty funny. We decided to go out on the inters because we had the choice. And yeah, but in the end, the rain did dry up as we see someone lock up there going off the track. I don't know who it was, but you're going to see that quite a lot today. But yes, we skipped later on in the session. The rain did dry up, so we set another time on the dry tyres. And we end up in P1 at the end of Q1. So yes, we went from a glitch to having the rain actually dry off, and we end up setting a time on dry tyres anyways. We lost in Q1, George Russell in the Mercedes, Albon in the Williams, Hamilton in the other Mercedes, Sargent in the other Williams, and then Ocon all the way back in the Alpine, probably taking the fact that he's lost his seat a little too hard. But both the Mercedes out in Q1 is the big shock there. Russell only in 16th and Hamilton only in 18th. Not looking very good for the Brackley lot as we see, go to Q2 now, we see our teammate locking up and nearly taking us out in the hairpin. Probably should have waited until we came around the hairpin there, Lando, but nonetheless we somehow managed to avoid contact. As we go to the end of the lap here in Q2, we set a time. Is it good enough for Q3? It is. We are P3 at the end of Q2 there. But yeah, Norris not making it easy for us. Even though we both made it through, we were separated by 1,000th of a second in the end, the two McLarens. As we lost from Q2, Hulkenberg, Magnussen, Sainz in the Ferrari, Zhou, and then Bottas. So both the Hasses, both the Saubers, and then the Shocker Q2 is Sainz, and the Ferrari being only P13. And even Leclerc only barely made it in, so Ferrari not having the best of Q2s. But Leclerc did make it in, Sainz did not. As we move on to Q3 now, we're going to set our final lap of qualifying here. We got Norris in P6, Tsunoda in P7, and both the RBs making it through into Q3. Same with both the Aston Martin, Stroll there in P8 currently. I don't know who's P1 right now, but I would assume it's Max, because it usually is Max. As we move through Sector 1. We actually set a purple Sector 1, as we can see on the mini-map on the bottom left there. So our time's looking good so far. And you can probably look at the handling and see how it's pretty bad. It is quite bad. Apparently there is a patch on the way that's coming very soon that's going to improve the handling. Not sure whether it will actually improve the handling, considering the track record for F1 game updates hasn't been the best. Especially in my case, I feel like a lot of updates make the game performance worse. But nonetheless, we'll see how that goes as we move on to the end of the lap, coming into the final chicane. Can we take the final chicane pretty well? We can actually. We did get through very smoothly. We charged to the line using all our ERS possible. And yeah, we made it into pole position. We got pole position for Oscar Piastri at the Canadian Grand Prix. Very, very good stuff for the McLaren team and for the Aussie driver. As I expected, Max Verstappen is in second. He was in the lead before. Perez in P3. Alonso in P4. Gasly in P5 for the Alpine. Very much outperforming his outgoing teammate. Leclerc in P6. Norris in P7. Tsunoda, our current championship leader, is in 8th. Lance Stroll is in 9th. And Daniel Ricciardo, the other Aussie, is at the other end of the top 10. And qualifying is done and dusted. So now all we got left is the main race. So it's now time for the Canadian Grand Prix.
It's Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, named for one of the great talents in Formula One history in a country with proud F1 heritage. It's a great circuit as well. Welcome to the Canadian Grand Prix. It's a 2.7 mile circuit, peaking at around 190 miles per hour. It's basically a series of chicanes and hairpins. We do have DRS zones, officially 14 turns, tight corners, and a real challenge for the drivers. So with the race not far away from starting, here's what today's grid rundown looks like. Oscar Piastri lines up on pole position, and Max Verstappen lines up alongside. Considering the rest of the grid, we have Perez, Fernando Alonso, Gasly, Leclerc, Norris, Tsunoda, Stroll, Ricciardo, Hülkenberg, Magnussen, Sainz, Zhou, Bottas, Russell, Albon, Hamilton, Sargent, and Esteban Ocon lines up at the back of the grid. Now, it's almost time for lights out, so let's go down to the track. It's race day, it's going to be a thriller. I'm Alex Jakes, alongside me is Naomi Schiff. Now, those final hours before a race, did you have a routine?
Well, every driver certainly has their own way of preparing themselves before a race. But I can tell you that pre-race rituals are a real thing. When I was in go-karting, I used to touch every wheel in a specific sequence before I got into the kart. And then I stepped up to cars and had a specific set of fireproof base layers just for race day. So watch the drivers when they're on the grid. Some may be sitting on the floor and isolating, others may be up to other things that they do. But these little things really help their minds get ready for the race.
And here we are on the grid at Montreal, starting from pole position. We're looking at a strategy here, a medium, hard strategy. I did experiment with a little bit, seeing what different possibilities we could have, but in the end, I can't really complain about that strategy. It seems like the best one. Although it did put me on a lot of fuel for some reason, so I did bump down my fuel just a tad. It very much overfueled me, and that would have put me at quite a disadvantage going into the race. So I bumped down the fuel a little bit, not too much, because again, I'm not too certain about my fuel use. As we move on to the formation lap. Now, everybody's starting on the medium tyres. No variation at all here. We could see some strategies play out, other strategies play out in the race, but nonetheless, we are all starting on the same tyres, everyone on the mediums, so it's very much going to be an even start, I would assume, if everyone's on new medium tyres. There may be some who are on used medium tyres, I don't know myself, it doesn't say, but nonetheless, it should be very much a test of skill at the start. No tyre advantages for anyone as we move on to the grid here. Lining up quite fast, actually, onto our grid box. We kind of come to a sudden stop. It's an interesting little thing here in this cutscene, but nonetheless, we are parked up in P1, waiting for everyone else to get in their position. Ocon being the last down there in P20. And here we go as we move to the 5 red lights. The first red light is not on for some reason, even though it is now, and it's lights out and away we go. I sounded like I was going to do some, like, rapping just then, but nonetheless, we get a good start. We hold on to the lead into turns 1 and 2. Verstappen slotting in behind us. Perez P3. Everyone kind of holding station. There's a few movers about, but I think Sargent's actually made up quite a few positions. He actually jumped his teammates. Now it does P17. And both the Mercs actually gaining some positions as well. Sainz being one of the biggest losers, going down from P13 down to P16. But up in front, we are still holding the lead. Verstappen chasing us. Obviously, we got the 2 Red Bulls quite close there, with Alonso kind of dropping off already from this little train. But he is still within DRS range. And remember now, we do have the DRS activating on lap 2 with the new game, corresponding with the IRL rules. Obviously, we couldn't do that in F1 23. So now we do have the DRS activating on lap 2, which means we do need to get away from Verstappen quite quickly. But in fact, he's right behind us. He's only 1.5 tenths behind us. And he has a little look at the inside of the last chicane, but we cover him off, keeping the lead going into the second lap here. So we do have Verstappen right on our gearbox, and here we are now on lap 3. He's actually 4 tenths behind us going into the DRS zone, which means he has a very good run at us going into last chicane. He goes to the outside and out-drags us to the corner, but we break a little bit later, and we're on the inside. We kind of push him out a little bit and hold on to the lead. Very good stuff, and that has put Verstappen out of sorts going into the first chicane, going into lap 4. So hopefully we can swing the momentum further our way and push ahead as we see Hulkenberg now on lap 8 in P11 going to the final chicane. He locks up going into the last chicane and actually rejoins in a very unsafe manner. There is a bollard you're supposed to go around, but clearly they haven't programmed that into the game as we see Sainz and Sargent going 3 wide into turn 1, and Sainz now locks up even. Going into turn 1, somehow all of them avoid making heavy contact, and Sainz ends up being the biggest loser in that scuffle, as Hulkenberg somehow holds on to P15. He has lost 4 places. As we move on to lap 16 now, we see Russell going in, and Zhou now locks up going into turn 1, which gives Magnussen a bit of a sniff on this fight for P11, but Russell holding on, making the move stick. Zhou somehow keeping P12 there, and Hamilton actually overtaking Magnussen there in the background for P13. As we now move on to lap 18 here. And we got a healthy lead to Verstappen.
I've got some information on Alonso. They've got some kind of mechanical problem.
As we hear, Alonso has a mechanical problem. Alonso currently running in P4, still in DRS range from Perez, but considering he has a mechanical problem, I have a feeling that's not going to last. As we see Gasly now in P6, who is seen to as slowing down going into the last chicane. Norris kind of being caught unawares. I banged my elbow on the desk, I'm sorry. But Gasly slowing down. It looks like we got our first retirement of the Canadian Grand Prix. Very much a shame for Gasly. He qualified so well in the Alpine and was running very well along the likes of Norris, Tsunoda and Ricciardo there. But nonetheless, he is coming to a stop as we see Zhou now, I think, actually hit the back of Gasly as he's retiring. I'm not sure why Zhou didn't just go around him or Gasly didn't go off the track, considering there was some runoff on the right-hand side there. But nonetheless, doesn't look like any damage has been done. Gasly is the first retirement in the Canadian Grand Prix. Will we see any more later on, or will Gasly be the only retirement? Who knows? as we see ourselves now on lap 22. Lap 22 is actually our pit window. Our pit window opens at lap 22, so we're actually going to come in for our first stop here of the day, which means we will relinquish the lead to at least Verstappen. I'm not sure about anyone else. Not sure if any of the Red Bulls are going to come in or not. Yeah, we do actually. We see Perez coming in the background there, and Alonso's actually lost a lot of ground. He's at 4.6 seconds behind Perez. I'm not sure if Alonso's coming in as well. Doesn't look like it. No, Alonso is staying out. Not sure if he's got the same mechanical issues as before. There's a yellow flag there. I just realised. I don't know what the yellow flag is for, but nonetheless, oh, I think it's for Gasly, actually. Gasly's still at the first chicane, as we just get out ahead of Charles Leclerc, which is very good for us. It gives us a bit of clear air to hopefully increase the gap to Verstappen, who will come in on the next lap, as far as I'm aware. And here he is now, actually just coming out of the pit lane. And he actually ends up being side-by-side with his teammate Sergio Perez. Perez nearly undercutting Verstappen here, but Verstappen with traction coming out of the pit lane and slightly fresher tyres, I should say, 1 lap fresher tyres, even though they're not up to temperature. He brakes a little bit later than Perez going into that chicane and keeps hold of P3. Ricciardo up to P2, but Ricciardo has not stopped yet. So Verstappen and Perez are still net P2 and P3 until we see Alonso actually catching up to Perez here. He actually has caught up to the Mexican driver, who locks up and lets Alonso through. So Alonso, after the mechanical issue, I guess the mechanical issue has been solved, is now up to a net P3. Thanks to Perez's mistake at the end of Sector 1 going into Sector 2. As we see Russell now battling Hülkenberg, I think again, surprisingly enough. Hülkenberg somehow making his way in front of Russell. But Russell going around the outside of the hairpin, and has more traction coming out the corner, and also has the DRS, since the DRS detection point was in the previous straight, which should give him the advantage. And no, actually, Hülkenberg actually still ahead, and Albon actually having a look now going into the last chicane, and somehow Russell, having the biggest advantage there, actually loses a spot to Alexander Albon in the Williams, surprisingly enough. Hülkenberg, even without DRS, was able to hold on to the position. Maybe through straight line speed alone, I don't know, but that seems to be very good in straight line speed. As we see Sainz now, and his engine has gone pop on lap 36 or 70, just over the halfway point, and we see our second retirement of the race is Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari, probably putting him out of his misery. Let's be honest, he did not have a good start and was not having a great race either. So, yeah, Sainz in the Ferrari is our second retirement of the day. As we move on to lap 44 now, we got a very healthy lead over Verstappen as we come in for our second and final pit stop. Lead 11.7 seconds, which means Verstappen probably will take the lead going into the next lap, but again, he'll need to pit as well as we move on to the hard tyres, because we need to use 2 different compounds. As we have a 2.3 second pit stop, which is a very good pit stop indeed. Verstappen has indeed taken the lead, but again, he'll need to stop again because he'll need to use another compound. So we come out and rejoin in P2, being ahead of Alonso there. Perez has pitted as well. Perez has definitely lost a lot of pace since the first pit stop and is now... was fighting with Leclerc actually for P4, and Leclerc looked like he had the advantage going into this. As we see Stroll now being hounded by Yuki Tsunoda for P7 going into the first corner, and both him and Tsunoda goes wide, which allows Hamilton to die down the inside and take 2 positions in 1 corner. Hamilton up to P7. I don't know whether he's pitted in again, but he's doing a nice little recovery drive for the Mercedes team, considering that he started down in P18 and is now running P7, as we see Leclerc now going down the inside of Perez in the first corner, going side by side into the second corner, going around the outside, still side by side, getting a bit of traction coming out of the corner. And Leclerc, if he brakes a little bit later, he does. He just holds on and gets P4 from Perez. Perez not having a good time since the first pit stop, has now lost 2 positions, going from 3rd to 5th. As we see Stroll again now fighting Norris for P7 here. And as we can see, Hamilton's actually dropped a few positions. I think his tyres were starting to wear. As we see Stroll and Norris side by side going into the second chicane. Stroll just holding on to the position. but I feel like that's going to be a fight that lasts till the end of the race. And even Tsunoda, and this is a whole DRS train going down to Hamilton. As we move on to lap 59 now, I'm starting to lap back markers, and we see one of the back markers go off, Esteban Ocon, who actually got overtaken by one of the Saubers there of Bottas, and I think the Williams of Sargent as well. So we lap Ocon, but we saw him very majorly lock up into the first chicane. That seems to be a thing with this game. There seems to be a lot of freaking lockups, like that one there, with Ricciardo locking up and losing many positions. He was in P6 and is now down to P10, and those lockups are not going to do very good for his tyres, considering Ricciardo has done a one-stop. He went from mediums to hards, and those hards have lasted for a very long time, but that lockup is not going to do him any favours, as he's actually now moved out of the points. Zhou and Magnussen then overtaking him. As we've moved on to the last lap now, it's been a pretty comfortable race for us, all things considered. We managed to make a gap to Verstappen, 14.5 seconds. Alonso, another 21.5 seconds further back from Verstappen. And Perez, 3.5 seconds behind Leclerc. So Perez definitely not having a great race. As we come through the last chicane, it's our first 100% race in F1 24 and it ends with a victory. Oscar Piastri wins the Canadian Grand Prix in a very comfortable manner. A good day out for McLaren. Norris getting P6 or P7 as well as Hamilton gets driver of the day. But yeah, Piastri wins in Canada.
He has left the field in his dust. Oscar Piastri takes the win.
And it's one thing to win, but to win like that in total dominant style, that was a fantastic drive, and it is not one that we see very often.
Our drivers are making their way out for the podium celebrations, and it's going to be McLaren picking up the winner's trophy. Congratulations to the entire team for that fantastic performance.
So there we go then, Piastri is our winner of the Canadian Grand Prix. McLaren's second victory of the season. Each of the drivers taking one victory. I can't remember when Norris won, but Piastri adds to the McLaren tally and takes his first win of Formula 1 as well. Very good stuff. Good stuff with McLaren and constructors as well. Both drivers getting a reasonable, well, one driver getting a very solid result and the other one getting a reasonable result. And Alonso actually on the podium despite having a mechanical issue in the middle of the race. Very good result for him. So yeah, after 70 laps, Oscar Piastri is our winner. I actually did do a faster lap at the end of the race. So I set my fastest lap on the last lap. So we take another point as well for fastest lap. Max Verstappen in P2, Alonso P3, Leclerc in 4th, Perez in 5th, Lance Stroll in 6th, a very good result for him for his home race. Norris finishing where he started in P7, same with Tsunoda in 8th. Magnussen getting some points for Haas there in P9, and Zhou Guanyu is the final person in the points paying positions in P10. Then we had the two Mercedes of Hamilton and Russell, solid recovery drives, sadly just outside the points for them. Ricciardo P13, if only he didn't lock up there with like 5 laps to go, he could have got some points there as well. Then we had the two Williams of Albon and Sargent in P14 and P15, Bottas in P16, Ocon in 17th, capping off a very dismal day for Alpine, and Hülkenberg is the last of the classified finishers in 18th, and we had two retirements, which were Carlos Sainz and Pierre Gasly. And there we go, that is the Canadian Grand Prix done. Next race is the Spanish Grand Prix in 2 weeks' time, which will be on the 21st of June. That video should go up, so look forward to that one. We got a triple header coming up, I believe, of Spain, Austria, and the UK, the British Grand Prix, if I remember my calendar correctly. If I don't, then I'll probably put some up on the screen now, but nonetheless, 2 weeks' time it is the Spanish Grand Prix. Carlos Sainz's home race, Fernando Alonso's home race. Hopefully they'll get some good results there, and hopefully they'll make their home fans proud. As for the driver's standings now, Tsunoda is still in the lead of the driver's standings, but Leclerc has caught up to him now. The gap is now 17 points at the top, with Verstappen now in P3, moving up to 80 points. Fernando Alonso, 1 point behind him with 79 points, and Hamilton moving down to 5th now with 77. Oscar Piastri now jumps his teammate Lando Norris. He actually jumps quite far up the standings, but Piastri is now 1 point ahead of Norris in P6, Norris in P7. Perez moving down to P8 now in 62 despite getting some points. Ricciardo moves down to P9 because of his lockup costing him dearly. And Alexander Albon rounds at the top 10 for Williams. As for the constructors, RB maintain the lead, but Ferrari now 20 points behind them, with Red Bull moving back up to third, a further 10 points behind Ferrari. I think the recovery drive for Red Bull is back on. I expect them to be leading the championship very soon. McLaren moving up to P4 now, a point ahead of Aston Martin in who are in P5. Mercedes falling all the way down to P6 now with 116 points, with a very disappointing weekend for the pair of Russell and Hamilton. Williams maintained 7th, Alpine maintained 8th, neither of them getting points today. Sauber getting 1 point, stay in P9 with 31 points, and Haas, despite getting a couple of points today with Magnussen, are still in last with 17 points. And there we go, that is the Canadian GP video done. This is our 9th race of the season. All the races going forward will most likely be on the F124 game unless they make the game literally unplayable, which at the moment is quite close to being, let's be honest. We'll see whether the handling update does any good. Well, hopefully the AI does get fixed a little bit in career mode as well. The Grand Prix AI seem to be okay actually, although they do lock up a lot. But for now, going forward, all the races should be on F124 unless, again, they literally break the game into like a million pieces. And our run of F124 races will continue with the Spanish Grand Prix at Barcelona in 2 weeks' time. So make sure to like this video, make sure to subscribe to watch all these F1 simulated races as they come out. So I release them on Friday of the race weekend at 12 PM British summertime /GMT once we get to that point in October. So make sure to subscribe to be informed of that. And yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this race. I did, despite the game being very not good. I did enjoy doing this race. I did enjoy making this video. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you all next time.